Hi, everyone. It's Mrs. Wells again. And as promised, we are going to start reading the chapter book Poppy by Avi. And so I'm going to switch over to the ebook, and you'll be able to read along with me if you would like to, or you can just listen and we will get started. I'm going to try. Here we go. The last time we were here, we were looking at Dimwood region and Dimwood Forest with Mr. Ocax's nest and Areth's log and Ocax's watching tree. But I will tell you that our story begins over here on Bannock Hill. So this is chapter 1, Mr. Ocax. A thin crescent moon high in the sky shed faint white light over Dimwood Forest. Stars glowed. Breezes full of ripe summer fragrance floated over nearby meadow and hill. Dimwood itself, veiled in darkness, lay utterly still. So sometimes I'm going to stop and just talk to you a little bit about what we just read. It's making me think here, our setting again. It says a thin crescent moon and that the stars glowed. So that makes me think that it's nighttime. So when I am making a picture in my mind, because there's no picture to tell me that it's nighttime right now, I'm making a picture in my mind that tells me that it's nighttime. And it says that it's full of ripe summer fragrance. So I know that it's summertime. So now I have a setting in my mind of what the story is going to look like. At the very edge of this forest stood an old charred oak on which sat a great horned owl. The owl's name was Mr. Ocax, and he looked like death himself. Mr. Ocax's eyes, flat upon his face, were round and yellow with large ebony pupils that enabled him to see as few other creatures could. Moonlight, even faint moonlight, was as good as daylight for him. With his piercing gaze, Mr. Ocax surveyed the lands he called his own, watching for the comings and goings of the creatures he considered his subjects and his dinners. So if he's considering them his subjects, that makes me think he thinks he's like a king. But he eats his subjects as well. So that's interesting. He looked at Glitter Creek, home to the fish he found so appetizing, the tar road across which tasty rabbits were known to hop, Jay's Wood, where meaty chipmunks sometimes skittered before dawn. By swiveling his head, he searched the marsh for a savory frog, then New Field, where usually he could count on a delicious vole or two. A vole is sort of like a mole. He looked at Gray House, where Farmer Lamount used to live, then upon the old orchard. He even looked nervously toward New House. That's interesting. But nowhere did he see a thing to eat. Profoundly annoyed, Mr. Ocax was beginning to think he would have no dinner that night. But finally, there, near the top of Bannock Hill, where the ponderosa pines had all been cut, where only a few struggling saplings and bushes grew, he saw movement. Just the glimmer of food was enough to cause his owl's heart to pound. His curved black beak to clack, his feathered horns to stand up tall. Mr. Ocax shifted his head right to left, forward and back, and when he did so, he beheld 2 mice. Of all the creatures the owl hunted, he enjoyed mice the most. They were the best eating, to be sure, but better still, they were the most fearful. And Mr. Ocax found deep satisfaction in having others afraid of him. And here, after a wait of nearly the whole night, were 2 savory subjects to terrify before he ate them. One of the 2, a deer mouse, crouched cautiously beneath a length of rotten bark. The other, a golden mouse, stood in the open on his hind legs, his short tail sticking straight out behind for balance. From his left ear, an earring dangled. In his paws, he held a hazelnut. "It's not as if I haven't warned these mice," Mr. Ocax murmured to himself. "If they will move about without my permission, they have only themselves to blame for the consequences." As he leaned forward to listen, his sharp as needles talons, 4 to each large claw, and jet black at their tips, cut deeply into the branch he was perched on. "Catching these 2 mice," he mused, is going to be fun. So I want to tell you about this space here. In this story, there's a lot of changing perspectives. And so what that means is we go from one character to a different character. And every time we do that, there's going to be this space here. So now we're going to a different character. On Bannock Hill, so we were up in the tree and now we're down on Bannock Hill. On Bannock Hill, the golden mouse turned to his timid companion and said, "Poppy, girl, this hazelnut is bad to the bone. Bet you see to sap there's more where it came from. Come on out and dig." "Pop, ragweed," Poppy replied as she sniffed tensely in all directions. "You promised we'd dance when we got here. We can't do it in the open. Besides, I want to answer your question. So will you please get under here with me?" She means under this bark. Ragweed laughed. "Dude, you must think I'm as dull as a dormouse. You just want to get some of this nut." "I don't want any of your precious nut," Poppy insisted. "I want to give you my answer, and I want to dance. Isn't that the reason we came up the hill? Only it's not safe out there." "Ah, tell me about it." You can see this must be Ragweed out here with the hazelnut. You can see a little earring in his ear. There's Poppy. "You heard my father's warnings," Poppy went on. "It's Mr. Ocax. He might be watching and listening." "Get off," Ragweed sneered. "Your pops talks about that Ocax dude just to scare you and keep you under control." "Ragweed," Poppy cried, "that's ridiculous. Mr. Ocax does rule Dimwood, so we have to ask his permission to be here, and you know perfectly well we never did." "Dude, I'm not going to spend my life asking an old owl's okay every time I want to have fun. Know what I'm saying? This is our moment, girl, right? And now that I've dug this nut up, I'm going to enjoy it. Besides," he said, "it's too dark for an old owl to see me." Now we know that owls can see at night. So there's a break in the page again, and we go back to Mr. Ocax. "Poppy," Mr. Ocax scoffed under his breath. "Ragweed. What stupid names mice have. Now, if only that deer mouse will move just a little farther out from under cover, I'll be able to snare both mice at once." The mere thought of such a double catch made Mr. Ocax hiss with pleasure. Then he clacked his beak, spread his wings, and rose up into the night air. Up he circled, his fluted flight feathers beating the air silently. High above Bannock Hill he looked down. The golden mouse, the one eating the nut, was still in the open. So brazen, so foolish. Nevertheless, Mr. Ocax decided to hold back another moment to see if the deer mouse might budge. Here's that break. "Ragweed," Poppy pleaded, "please get under here." "Girl," Ragweed said, "do you know what your problem is? You let your tail lead the way." Poppy, hurt and wanting to show she was not a coward, poked her nose and whiskers out from under the bark. "Ragweed," she persisted, even as she began to creep into the open, "being careless is stupid." Her friend took another scrape of the nut and sighed with pleasure. "Poppy," he said, "you may be my best girl, but admit it, you don't know how to live like I do." Poppy took 2 more steps beyond the bark. Just then, Mr. Ocax pulled his wings close to his body and plunged. In an instant, he was right above and behind the 2 mice. Once there, he threw out his wings to break his speed, pulled back his head to protect his eyes, and thrust his claws forward and wide like grappling hooks to pounce. It was Poppy who saw him. "Ragweed!" she shrieked in terror as she hurled herself back under cover. "It's Ocax!" But the owl was already upon them. Down came his right claw. It scratched the tip of Poppy's nose. Down came his left claw. It was more successful, clamping around Ragweed's head and neck like a vise of needles, killing him instantly. The next moment, the owl soared back into the air. A lifeless ragweed, earring glittering in the moonlight, hung from a claw. As for the hazelnut, it fell to the earth like a cold stone. Keep track of that hazelnut. Comes back at the end of the story. powerful but leisurely strokes brought Mr. Ocax back to his watching tree. Once there, he shifted the dead ragweed from talon to beak in one gulp. The mouse disappeared down his throat, earring and all. His hunger momentarily satisfied, Mr. Ocax tilted back his head and let forth a long, low cry of triumph. Woo! Woo! Poppy did not hear the call. In her terror, she had fainted. Now she lay unconscious beneath the length of rotten bark. The owl did not mind. He had enjoyed the first mouse so much, he decided to wait for the second. Indeed, Mr. Ocax was not entirely sorry that Poppy had escaped. She was terrified, and he enjoyed that. And for sure, he would get her soon. Oh, yes, he murmured to himself. Mice are the most fun to catch. Then Mr. Ocax did that rare thing for an owl. He smiled. So that's the beginning of Poppy. It's sort of a shocking first chapter. I hope you're excited to read and listen to the rest of the book, and I will be back with you for chapter 2 soon.